Board agenda regular meeting. Mr. Wilson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Grove?
Present.
Mr. LaFurla?
Present.
Mr. Kazire?
Present.
Dr. Ogres?
Present.
Ms. Riley?
Present.
Mr. Hanson?
Present.
And Mr. Arthur is out of town. If everybody could please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that brings us to approval of our agenda.
I move approval of our agenda as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Wonderful. Moved and seconded. And now we need approval of our minutes.
We need to
Oh, pardon me,
vote on that.
Mr. Wilson.
We can just do a
Okay.
voice vote.
voice vote.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Minutes carries. Approval agenda carries. Approval of the minutes. Regular meeting of June 27, 2017.
I move approval of the minutes of the regular meeting, June 27, 2017, to be approved as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right. This is public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board regarding agenda items or other matters of concern. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we are going to move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Murillo.
Thank you.
Welcome.
At this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Hamilton to join me at the podium. He is going to introduce his guests tonight. They are going to be presenting on the annual report of the students' extracurricular activity. Mr. Hamilton, the floor is yours.
And before Mr. Hamilton does his little speech, I would like to invite Dr. Murillo to stand. We have a Council Bluffs Community School District pin for you that all of our employees receive, and we wanted to give that to you tonight at your first
thank you.
board meeting.
Thank
So,
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. Thank you, Board, for having us tonight. This is the annual report on our extracurricular activities at our high schools. I just wanted to remind you that a month or 2 months ago now, we had a report on 21st Century. That used to be included with this, but since 21st Century is expanding, they will continue to do theirs on their own. So you have a lot of information in your board packet with a lot of data. I've invited Mr. Jeremy Stuckenholtz from Thomas Jefferson to come. Mr. Novotny from Abraham Lincoln was not able to make it tonight, but Kyle Forney is here in his place. If you have questions at the end, feel free to answer, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end. Go ahead and click through here, Tim.
Okay, I am Jeremy Stuckenholtz, Activities Director at Thomas Jefferson for our annual report. And as Tim said, Kyle's with me here today since Jeff is not able to be here. So we'll go through this. You should have received a packet of information that we collect from year to year to look through, so it's more detailed than this, and you can ask questions about it when we're done. You want to help me? Our first slide here is just our mission statement and some of the things that we believe in the Council Bluffs Community Schools about activities. I'll just highlight a few things. And we probably say this every year, but we really believe that our activities and our athletics and our fine arts programs are an extension of the classroom. And there are very important lifelong lessons that students learn by being a part of these activities. So one of the things that we try to do is we try to engage all of our students in at least one, if not more, of these activities. And we know, and some of the data will show, but we know that students who are engaged in their high school experience through activities have higher grade point averages. They come to school more often, and they have less discipline problems. We know that, and we've known that for decades. But it's, something that we look at every year and, try to make sure we're doing the right things. So just some highlights. Like I mentioned, we try to get all of our students involved in activities, and at both schools, we've seen increases in kids getting involved. Especially, I just noted ninth graders. We really go after ninth graders because it's important. You always hate it when you hear a kid say, I wish I would have. So that's why it's really important that we get ninth graders involved, because we believe they'll stay involved if we can get them. There's also some information up here just regarding, like I said, kids who are involved and how much better they do in school and with attendance and just being better students. And so here's some highlights from both schools. We continue to find ways to not only engage our high school students, but looking for ways to engage our middle school students and our elementary students. So we just put up some things that, some of these things are things we've done at both schools for years and years now. Some of these things are new things, but we're constantly looking for ways to engage all of our students, K-12, and our coaches and sponsors go above and beyond the call of duty to go out and work with third graders and seventh graders and high school kids, and they don't get paid a dime for it, but they know it's what's best for kids, so they do it. So most generally, the stuff you see up here, a lot of it's free. It's just, people doing the right things by kids.
What's nice about that too is the high school students actually go down to those feeder programs with the coaches, and they'll help at like track meets and stuff. So it's really rewarding.
Absolutely.
Do they have robotics up there for feeder programs? by chance?
Robotics is not up here for feeder programs, but we did talk about that yesterday. So
Okay,
yeah,
good.
there's robotics going on at the elementary and middle school
Right.
levels.
Right.
That has funneled down very quickly.
Yeah.
And Troy could speak more about that because I think he's heavily involved in it.
Yes.
But yeah, it's one of those things that's really taken off. One of the things that we had some of this in our slide presentation last year, so some of this it's just been edited a little bit because it just needed updated. But one of the things we talked about when we talked about the new athletic complex was we were going to engage our students in different ways. We were going to bring people into our community to this beautiful facility. So it's good to remind everyone, including myself, of all the things that we have going on there. I'll just highlight things at the athletic complex. We were very busy this spring hosting track meets, 4 soccer tournaments, 2 softball tournaments. So some of the things in the spring and summer, the wrestling tournament and the basketball tournament and the baseball tournament, things we've done in the past. And we've just continued to see these events grow. It's exciting when we can bring people from the Des Moines area and other metropolitan areas into our community. And I went with our softball team because we won the first round of districts this year. Went to Waukee. We had to play Waukee. They're the #1 team in the state. And I was visiting with the AD from Waukee, and he said, most people when they come to our softball complex, they're pretty impressed and they're kind of wowed. And I told our kids, I don't think the TJ kids will, because their complex is pretty darn nice. But that was a nice compliment that people have. So people they want to come. I mean, they want to be involved in activities here, and part of that's because of the complex that we have created.
My daughter played softball, and I remember our freshman year, we had concessions out of the shed on pallets. We had to stand on pallets because when it would rain the night before, the water would get in the shed. So all of our food and everything had to be up. It was a nightmare. So
Becomes hard to remember some of those things.
I still have pictures.
Yeah, I'm sure you
So
do.
I show them to people when they complain about things and say, no, this is
Here,
really good."
here are some athletic and activity highlights from the year. A lot of these particular students and teams have been recognized with star awards throughout the year. So you've seen a lot of these kids and coaches and sponsors, but just kind of a synopsis of the year. It's another great year at both high schools in terms of being very competitive statewide and nationally. And we have great kids and coaches, and they're doing great things. So just some highlights there. And that sort of concludes my somewhat formal presentation. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about anything going on in the athletics activities world at either high school
Anybody have any
or middle school or
questions?
elementary school.
I think you're off
Easy.
the hook.
No?
Yeah.
Val, do you want to- Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both. Before I conclude our superintendent's report, and I think I got off a little easy on this first round, I just wanted to thank the board for this opportunity. And I really look forward to working with each of you. And thank you for your patience as I continue to grow and learn your governance structure, and look forward to a great journey we're going to have together. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hamilton, and our two members from the two high schools. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I appreciate it. And that concludes our report.
Wonderful. Next, we have informational presentations, discussion of legislative priorities for 2018.
Good evening.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Diane.
It's good to be here with you to talk about the legislature. January session seems a long time away, but we, at this time of year, have a discussion about priority areas. One, the last session's kind of fresh in our minds, and two, the Iowa Association of School Boards asks us as a local governing body, you all as board members, to submit to them some areas that they should consider when they meet as a delegate assembly. Mr. Grove, are you part of that delegate assembly?
No.
No, not part of that one, okay. And Mr. Kozier has served as a representative there many years to help us carry the word forward about particular areas of interest for lawmakers. So what I am hoping to do tonight is to just present to you a few highlights of what we have suggested as priorities in the past, allow you to have some good conversation around what we should submit this year. And then during the resolution portion of the meeting is when hopefully you can come to some consensus, and we can then have our marching orders for getting those 5 priority areas to the Association of School Boards. Okay?
Diane,
Yes.
I might mention that Murray Finn is a representative from Southwest Iowa on that legislative committee.
Okay.
I think you know him, don't you? Yeah.
Okay.
He works for the AAA, but he's a board member on Riverside School District, so.
So he has he has a voice at the table as
Yes,
they're
so
discussing.
I'm just saying for any of my colleagues here on the board, if you know him and you want to twist his arm or something and say, hey, make sure you push this issue, because they're going to meet here in August sometime.
Thank you, Bill. So these are 5 areas that in the past we have, you as a board have pushed forward the most, many, many years in some cases. So I thought I would just, the following slides kind of walk through each of those and what our position has been and what our priority statement has been related to those. The state sales tax for schools. We were hopeful last year that it would, that there would be a lift on the sunset, or they would expand the current SAVE fund beyond the sunset date of 2029, but it didn't come to fruition. So a lot of encouragement among the legislators to continue the fight toward this, for this coming legislative session. And we, of course, in Council Bluffs, have run out of our capacity to borrow ahead, and so an extension would allow us to generate more funds through bonding that would allow us to upgrade specifically our middle schools that are in dire need. The statewide voluntary preschool program, we all have shared a priority around making sure that every eligible 4-year-old who could benefit from an early childhood program has the opportunity to do that. And at this time, as you know, it's only funded at about half. And we have full-day programs. We feel like that's best for students, more convenient for families. And so full weighting for students in those small class-size classrooms is really critical to maximize our services to kids. We've tried to kind of put a lot of the finance things into one small point, but timely, equitable, adequate school funding have them set it early enough, we can plan for the next year, have it be adequate to meet the needs of the growing cost of expenses, and then perhaps consider some extended waiting for students in poverty who need additional services not covered by the basic. This one is a priority area that the board added last year. It was related to protection of public funding for public schools. Compulsory attendance is one that's been a perennial favorite and related to raising the Iowa compulsory attendance age beyond age 16. I applaud the board last year for being creative and just saying not just to raise it to 18, but to do something creative, like I say, and say until the graduation requirements are met. English learner funding is one that we are proposing you consider in your conversation tonight, and that's about creating a heavier weighting or more funding per student for English learners. That would allow us to provide additional services to the students who could benefit from those experiences. So I would invite you at this time to have a conversation around those priority areas and any others that you might bring to the table, so we can then later get your resolution regarding what we will submit for priorities for the 2018 session.
Does anybody have any questions for Diane? Comments?
Well, maybe it would help. I went to the fiscal conference that IASB sponsored last week, and a lot of these same items were discussed there. And I think the advice of IASB is that there's not going to be a lot of money to dish out. The governor's going to call a special session here in October because they already know they're $100 million in the hole on the budget they just passed. And she only has authority to steal $50 million from other accounts. So if they have another estimate for the revenue estimating committee that's as dire as the last one, the thing on SSA is probably moot. We'll be lucky to get anything. And we were lucky to get the 1.1 this year because it did do it on time this year before they fully knew what the rest of the state budget demands were. So I guess my recommendation based on that input last Tuesday, or Wednesday it was, asking for financial help this year is not a good move. Sorry to say. They think our best push is to save. And several organizations, ISEA, IASB, SAI, are going to try to have a meeting with the new Governor Reynolds because it's critical to figure out what her position is on this thing. And hopefully she has a little different twist than Governor Branstad had. And also, I know in the past, people in Des Moines have talked to Dr. Bruckner about how we've used the penny. And what ASB is doing this summer is they're going around to each corner of the state and picking a school district and getting the school people there to talk to them about what they use it for, and then they're inviting the press in. So I think they're going to have a big, really PR push based on those school visits. And I don't know if they're going to try to contact us or not, but I think if they do, we ought to do it.
Sure.
Do you know if there's been any studies done on that, on whether how it's affected our state, of whether or not it's been hurtful or helpful in districts, or have
Well,
they done anything like that, or is this as close as we're going
yes.
to get to it?
One of the things that happened a year ago is the legislature required the Department of Education to do a facility study of every school district.
Okay.
And they have that information now. It's just kind of interesting. During fiscal 2016, there were 11 successful bond issues totaling $156 million. But districts also levied $274 million in their Pebble funds and $725 million from SAVE funds. So you can see from those statistics that, well, the save dollars is 5 times what the bond issues are. And, you know, getting 60% on a bond issue is really tough right now. So I think if we push that angle, you know, the tax is already there. It's not an increase. Sure, you can argue it might be an increase if you extend the deadline, but people are used to paying the penny for schools. So we think we have a pretty good chance to get it this year. That's what they're saying. And our lobbyist says that several of the representatives are all for it because they can give something to schools in a year where they can't give them more money. So that's kind of the tack they're approaching. They also talked about the equity issue, both in transportation and in state aid per pupil. I think there's a lot of support for that among the legislature, but with the money not being there, it isn't going to happen,
Takes money.
at least next year. So, you know, that's my 2 cents from being at that meeting. And I think if our emphasis is on the save, that would be huge. And keep some of these other ones out there, like the equity. I don't have any problem with the other ones you put up there, but sometimes I think one of the things the Legislative Resolution Committee will do is have to prioritize. Usually like to have 3 or 4. And if we send 5 or 6, that's okay. But realistically, I think putting the effort in the save is huge.
So is IASB saying probably not a good idea to be asking for new money? I mean, I understand that. So things like full-weighted preschool and English learner, probably not a good idea this year. But
You know,
I think it would be kind of a mistake not to say timely, equitable, and adequate school
Oh,
funding.
sure.
Just because they don't have the money doesn't mean we don't need it.
that's right.
And so it still should be a priority, even though we know we're not getting
Well, that's what I'm
any.
saying. If we list 5 or 6 from our board, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying realistically, I think asking, well, no, 2 years ago, the IASB quit asking for a percentage, remember? Just tried a different strategy, and that was really favorably received by the legislator.
Are there any other opportunities to ask for more flexibility?
Yes,
So,
Yes,
yes.
I was going to bring that up.
We had some this year, and I think they're talking about doing more.
okay.
Well, I was looking over the whole thing, what went through the pipeline, and I was looking for things, because I know that the money is tight and the taxes and everything, whether we would get or not, and I was kind of looking for things that wouldn't necessarily, that would affect us, that would help us, but not necessarily affect the money. And one of the things was school calendars. I know we had a big to-do, 2 years ago with the calendars. And that was on their pipeline report with no action taken. And, I would be in support of putting something like that out there, that it would be beneficial for us to set our own calendar in our own district for what we do, because we have more in common with, I hate to say it, the city across the river, and the things that I'm actually personally involved in. It does hit a little hard when the calendar starts late. And I would have, that would be one thing that would give us local control over what we do without actually asking for any money. And that might be something that we'd be able to put forward that would not, I don't want to say ruffle any feathers, but it's already on there, and that would be one that we'd be able to support.
I think that'd be fine, as long as you don't violate the rule, can't start till after the state fair.
Well,
They fought that battle, and I don't think they're gonna revisit that. Like, the 21st of August is the first day you can start school this year. But that wouldn't preclude flexibility in the rest of the calendar.
right.
How many thousands more students make it to the state fair?
I will go.
I think I would like
doubt
to,
that's that's ridiculous.
I know Dr. Murillo is new, but, I could also go on over the fact of one thing that would not necessarily cost any money, but would help us affect, and it is a state law, the cutoff date for enrollment to the district, because it's March 30th. And if we can move that down a couple of months to, July 1st or something.
Sure.
It wouldn't necessarily cost them any money. But that would be one that I would be willing to support, is to extend that, to give parents a little bit more flexibility you know, whether they're moving or whether they're coming in. I know there's exceptions, but that's one that's been a bee in my bonnet for a while. If you could push that date back, and that would be one that I would be able to support too.
Sure.
Is that deadline in place be for budgeting purposes? Is that why that deadline is there?
I assume.
Well, as it was
Even though
explained,
they don't pass the
Yeah.
the funding until after that date anyway?
as our prior superintendent explained to us once when we were debating whether or not to accept an open enrollee that had applied after the deadline, the purpose of setting it at March 30th, the end of March, was that we then have April and May and the rest of summer to hire enough teachers to handle all of our open enrollee students, so that we can plan ahead and be adequately staffed. Whereas if we find out we just have another 300 students coming in on July 30th,
That'd be a good problem.
It'd be a very good problem. I agree with you on
Point well
that.
taken.
it
yeah.
would be a good problem,
Yes.
except that those 300 students would then need teachers, and it would be very difficult to find
Limited market.
adequate teachers to start within a month, when many teachers sign their contracts and they know where they're going to be teaching well in advance of that.
Well, and see if the fiscal year ends on the end of June, we could, have the cutoff date June 1st. You have 30 days. You have 30 days to accept or deny the enrollment, and then we would still know, and they would still have,
And we meet
I
the
guess
end of
it-
June.
July and August, but like Diane said, it would be a good problem to have. But, it would be interesting to see if we have a jump and increase or if we don't. Maybe there's not a need, maybe there is, maybe we're losing people or we're not getting enough people because the deadline is there and.
I guess I'd like to know from an HR perspective, is that an issue?
It would be a big issue. I saw Toby over there getting a little like
I'd love to
squirmy.
hear Toby's.
So I'm
input.
sitting in a different chair, I can't see him
Yeah.
anymore.
New perspective on things, right, Susan?
I know, I can see you.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Toby.
asking that question.
you bet.
Actually, it would be very difficult. One of the things the board has always approved as well in the past is an early notification incentive that we give our teachers if they notify us by end of December, that we give them $1,000 in order to let them know so we can get ahead of the game and hire all those great candidates that are just getting ready, either finishing in December, that are looking for jobs already, and we get them in as substitutes to kind of practice and learn the school district in the spring, and then we get them hired. The other thing, it would be a nightmare for licensing with the Board of Educational Examiners,
They're
because
not gonna
just a
get their
background check
license.
that the Board of Educational Examiners runs for a new teacher's license takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks just to process that piece. We had all our hiring done, all our offers made the first week of June this year, and all the teachers put in place already by then. So it would be very difficult, and with most school districts providing contracts being signed already at the end of May, maybe into June, we would be not poised to have the best teachers out there.
I mean, would it be, if you're looking at March 30th, and not necessarily May 30th, but would be there be a deadline date in there that would be, compromisable either way, or?
I can always, HR is always willing to compromise anything. The earlier we get ahead of the game, the better we are to recruiting the best candidates for our students.
Okay.
The current deadline, just to confirm, is March 1st, and then September 1st for kindergarten students. So they do have a little bit more time as parents realize their child's going to be entering school. But realistically, and we could provide that data, but realistically, we don't have a large shift in the numbers of students who open, enroll, in or out on a given year. We kind of have a stability factor there. So while we would love to have a surprise number of open enrollment in, and we would definitely work to accommodate that, our history doesn't show that has caused a tremendous shift in our staffing.
What's been the pushback from compulsory attendance?
I think there are some legislators who feel like that will cost the state more money. Dave, would you like to speak to that?
Usually the argument against compulsory attendance past the age of 16 is that those districts consider those students troublemakers, and we don't want them in the classroom anyway. They're just disruptive. I mean, that's always the argument of keeping the compulsory age at 16. But I always love the fellow from Fort Madison who would always come up and say, well, if they're not going to be in school, they're going to be in the facility at Fort Madison. So it's
Which is more expensive.
which is more expensive. And from that standpoint, the legislators saying that it costs more, it doesn't, because they're already accounted for. And if the money is already accounted for. If they were in school. So it's not costing the taxpayers any more dollars to have that student in class because it's already accounted for. It's always a battle.
I guess just with our district and our successful graduation coaches and how hard they work, I mean, I think we would be a set example of how we already do that, not by mandation, but, you know, that we are doing really well.
Well, the 11 years that I've been a delegate, it's always the same conversation. We don't want them.
Well, we want.
I mean, no, that's, well, I mean, that's the response. The board members that speak in opposition of the resolution say they don't want them. They're troublemakers. We don't want those kids in our school. And it's like, we're the adults. We need to figure out what those students need to be successful in school, so.
Well, based on my experience when I was involved, 4 different districts, I could not get the county attorney to help us. The compulsory part is what's hard. What is the sanction? You know, the county attorney can write a letter to the parents. Parents still doesn't get their kids to school. What do you do next?
Take their driver's license.
Gets to be
is
a
what's
big problem. And so I can't speak for the legal community, but based on my experience of 10, 12 years ago, they're not enthusiastic about it. So that doesn't help either. Maybe it's changed now, I don't know.
If I might, the other one that wouldn't necessarily cost anything, in fact, could save the state some funding, would be to really push for the appropriate protection of funding for public schools again this year. I feel like that conversation isn't going away. I think that the private school families and advocates are up at the Capitol nearly every day promoting the idea of vouchers or college savings accounts, that kind of thing. So if that's one that you might consider, I feel like that would be a worthy position and priority to set.
I think it's just like the one Chris stated about some of the others. We need to have them there just to remind them that we're still concerned about it.
Yeah.
The comment that our lobbyist said about that is that some of the legislators have figured out if the ESAs really go through, the small rural schools are going to hurt big time. I mean, if we lose 100 or 200 kids to wherever, you know, it's a pain and it hurt. But it's not like if you're a district of 400 kids and you lose 30, that has big ramifications. So they don't think it's going to pass next year, but I think it'd be good for us to put that on the list. I agree with you, Diane.
I'm definitely in favor of that being one of our priorities.
I agree.
Are there, I heard conversation around staying away potentially from those that would cost money, but there'll be other people asking for money. So the legislators will have some choices to make. Are there any of the costly items that we would like to push forward because we believe strongly that it will positively affect our students?
Did you mention the early intervention program?
I did not.
Our people brought that up because it expires at the end of this school year. And I don't know how many dollars that is, but.
85,000 for us.
Okay.
Is this the 3rd grade reading intervention or? which
Yes.
one or two? Yeah.
You know, and probably it's up in the air because they did away with that requirement. You know, you have to hold the kids back after 3rd grade. But, I don't know, do we feel it has value?
We
Well, for kids, too.
we absolutely provide interventions for students, and that $85,000 is put to good use for students in the classroom who need that support. Absolutely.
Diane, can I ask, is that where we pay for the reading interventionist from? Your reading specialist? No. So you use that for supplemental software? Yeah, yeah. So that is a really good software to have in place.
Well, I think statewide, it's probably a low dollar item compared to everything else. So I wouldn't have any problem putting that on, too.
Well, I think that we want to put forth those priorities that don't divide us between large districts and small districts, because that's always the tension in the delegate assembly, is that it's always the large districts that get those items that they want, and whereas the smaller districts don't get those important things. So I think when we look at what can be done to unite the boards from large and small school districts is equity. That's an important issue when you have East Dubuque that has an incredibly large boundary that they serve students and have over $1,000 per student for busing. That reduces their classroom budget from $6,600 per pupil for the classroom to $5,600. So it's really not an equitable situation where their busing expenses take away from those dollars that can go into the classroom. So I mean, when we can look at that, when we can look at priorities that unite us as a state board, as state boards of boards of education throughout the state, I think we can accomplish more through the legislatures, through the legislature. So I think we want to definitely have those items that unite us. So equity is always an important topic, whether it's rural or urban. So if we start there, and same with the SAVE dollars, those unite us. Those small districts wouldn't have those tax dollars available to them, and typically to be able to put together a bond issue to make those improvements to their facilities. So those two right off the bat, for me, would be very helpful from a delegate assembly standpoint, because there's commonality between those districts for the priorities.
Would a legislative priority that provide schools more flexibility in spending help with the equity as well, or?
I would definitely think that would be the case.
Flexibility thing, Dean? I mean, is there?
The flexibility that was passed by the legislature in the last session was basically revolving around districts who have a lot of categorical carryover balances. So they say, here's some money, here's a pot of money, you can only spend it for this. If you don't spend all of it, you can carry it over till the next year. We've actually been pretty good. There are some districts with very large carryovers. Our carryover at June 30th last year for all of our categoricals was about 650 grand was all. It would provide some flexibility, but our district would not benefit from something like that. The whole concept of the spending authority and everything that we talk about, if they would loosen some of those parameters up, that would help out a bunch. But I don't see that they're going to do that.
Dave, typically how many resolutions come out of the delegation? I mean, dozen, 2 dozen, 4? There's a huge list here of everything's under different
Well, they always break down
categories.
their
There's student
priorities.
achievement and educator quality.
Right.
Right.
They have priorities in each of those categories, whether it be student achievement, category funding. So there are typically about 12 or 16 priority categories that they have. Not 16, but probably 12 that that they funnel each of those items through. But generally, it's 4 that make it out of the delegate assembly, 4 to 6 that make it out of the delegate assembly that are the priorities.
We've heard some good conversation, Dr. Ogres, about some of the ones we've proposed in the past, but also 3 new ones. 4 if you count the English learner additional weighting. How could we help you build some consensus around the 4 or 5 that we would like to submit? So when it comes to the resolution portion of the meeting, you have a motion before you.
I've written down the 3 that seem important to most people. So I think we should just go down the list of what we have and just decide if it's important to us or not and have that discussion.
I would suggest we could categorize them by, we realize there's not much money, but we want you to keep these in mind, like the SSA, the early intervention, the equity. So that'd be 3 different. And then we really want to push on the SAVE.
Right, and I have the appropriate protection of funding for public schools and then the equity.
Yeah. And then the negative one is don't approve the educational savings accounts. I mean, to me, that's pretty good list of 5 different bullets. I don't know,
What were your
but
other
I'm
2?
willing to,
Sorry.
pardon?
What were your other 2?
Well, I lumped 3 of them under funding.
Okay,
The SSA, the equity for transportation and per pupil,
right,
and the early intervention program.
okay.
Those are 3 financial. And then the SAVE, and then the negative against the ESA. I don't know, that's, to me, that summarizes pretty much what we've been talking about, I think.
Right. Does anyone have any discussion about that? Questions?
Sorry, what were they again?
So he's going to lump in
Couple of them
under
were yours.
funding, SSA, equity, and early intervention.
Yes.
And then the other 2 were SAVE and ESA. So 5 total.
And how many of those are directly money-related?
First 3.
3.
First 3.
Supplemental state aid, equity issues for transportation and per pupil cost, and then the extended early learning program that expires in a year.
For 3rd grade summer programming.
Dean, aren't we about $200 per pupil less than the state average for per pupil spending?
I want to say it's something like 109, 110,
Oh, I'm
somewhere in there.
about too much, too high.
But it's lower than the average, yeah, it's lower than the highest.
But that'd mean almost $1 million for us.
It would mean $1 million. We calculated that last year, it's about $1 million.
I mean, that's
A lot of money.
significant.
Right.
But again, as you pointed out, there's no money.
Yeah, I know. But at some point in time, hopefully, the state will get their act together and
And see,
we'll get
that actually goes back to something that Chris brought up, because Davenport is pushing this.
500, yeah.
They have enough cash on hand, but they
can't
have no
use it.
spending authority.
Right.
In fact, their spending authority is negative now. And they are saying, hey, we have this cash, why not change the rules so if we have cash on hand, we can use that towards spending authority? And there was some push in the legislature last year, some discussion about that, but it never really went anywhere. That would be the flexibility that would be helpful.
Any other discussion?
I think we're taking on too many directly money-related items with ours when we know the money's already tight. So I think at most 2, but ideally only 1 that's directly money-related when we go to it. And although I don't consider the negative on the spending accounts as money-related, because that's not saying we want more money, it's saying don't put the money over here, keep the money where it's going. Although it's difficult to say which one, what needs to get cut. The SAVE, which we believe this might be a good year for, should probably be the money item that we push for. And then choose one of the other 2 to take off of our list. Although I'd like to have the compulsory attendance up through graduation to be added to the list. Because that's one that they might not directly view as costing them additional money.
In taking Scott's point, Bill, just because you brought it up earlier, the transportation equity would really help the rural districts a lot. It really wouldn't do much for us. So if you did want to drop something out, that could be your something.
Which one?
Well, I think the other thing we need to remember, there's 330 districts
Right.
that are probably putting their wish list in here, and
Right.
the Legislative Relations Committee has to sort of that out, right, Dave?
Yes.
So whatever list we come up with, I'm really fine with, knowing that
So-
it'll be a part of the hopper, but
Right.
I think
So
it's valuable
that's
for us to
six.
have this discussion, though, so that we as a local board know where our hearts are. That may be the most helpful thing right now.
Right.
Can I just ask you one question?
Sure.
I know we've talked about this, but there was something on here that I just had a question on that they had in. Alternative licensure. Supports the adoption of alternative teacher licensure upon completion of research-based teaching. Is that,
I'm
Is
looking
that-
at my colleague.
is that necessarily for just teaching, or is that trades, or is that getting people in the classroom, or?
Are you familiar with that?
I'm gonna make you work tonight, sorry.
Actually, it can be a real positive thing. Some of our roles that we use in some of our centers, like if Mr. Forney was still here, he would tell you, we've
Okay.
enlisted one of those type of teachers for one of our positions at the Tucker Center in the fall to teach the automotive and stuff. They're the subject matter experts in those fields. So it's a great opportunity for us to get someone who has to have some classes and some training on how to be a great educator, but also, and so we are going to give them that here with the training and stuff that the teaching and learning department does, and they do such great opportunity for that for professional development. But we're going to have the skills that they got from a trade school to be able to share that with our students to provide those additional opportunities.
Okay.
That's something our friends across the river have been dealing with as well. But we have used it to our advantage here in some areas, and it's been a very positive experience, and we continue to utilize that when we can.
Okay, so they're not necessarily required to have a teaching degree or a bachelor's or anything
No,
to
but
teach
there are
the
very
trade?
specific requirements that go with it and some extra
Okay.
hoops they have to go through to get that. So it's not as easy as it sounds, just like, oh,
Right.
you've done this for your career and you have this type of alternative degree, you can all of a sudden automatically teach. There are a very structured number of hours, years of experience. So it is, the Board of Educational Examiners still has to prove that type of licensure
Okay,
for those individuals. So it can be very positive for us too.
okay, thank you.
I guess one last point I'd like to make before we move forward. Some of the discussion that small districts have, just to give you a flavor of what's going on, there were several school districts that put forth a resolution. Their priority was to not allow the University of Iowa to play football on Friday because it interferes with their high school performance. So I mean, here we have things that we're talking about that are important for things going on in the classroom. And yes, extracurricular activities are very important, but I mean, for a school district to set forth saying, well, we need to make sure the state doesn't allow the University of Iowa to play football on Friday night because it interferes with our. So I mean, it's just really weird, some of the resolutions that are brought forth before the, for the delegate assembly. That's just my one last.
Maybe we could move the high school football night to a different night.
So if
So-
I'm hearing everyone correctly, we'd like to move forward with 6. Is that correct?
Somebody can make a motion when we get to that part.
SSA, equity, early intervention, SAVE, ESA, and compulsory attendance. Is that the list that we've kind of come up with?
I would still like to remove one of the direct money items simply because we recognize there's going to be limited funding. So it's better to focus in where we think we can get the funding.
While I
And the
res-
SAVE and the early intervention, the early intervention might be likely because it's a relatively small dollar amount. And the SAVE is likely because we've tried that every year, and this year they say looks a bit better than most other years.
I don't think we need to be afraid of asking for money. And I think that these are directly related to student achievement, and I think that we need to keep all of them at this point. That would be my recommendation. And that's our
Well,
purpose of why we're
yeah,
here, is for
well-
student achievement. And just because they don't have the money, or they say they don't have the money, doesn't mean we don't ask for it. And we've narrowed down our list that listed a lot of things asking for money to 3, and I think that's reasonable. Any other discussion? Okay, moving on.
Thank you for a thoughtful
Diane.
discussion.
Update on meeting with Crescent representatives. Dr. Murillo?
Thank you. I wanted to ask for some time for the board to have some discussion around Crescent. You know that we met with the representatives from Crescent and had a really positive meeting. Ms. Riley was there, Mr. Arthur was there, and what I'd like to see is really begin to look at this in a positive light and how we can work with the community and build the community and engage them back to feeling really good about Council Bluffs Community School District and how we can become a real good partner with them. So we listened to the representatives. Ms. Riley, please jump in anytime that you want to add. And kind of our takeaway was to allow the new principal to create and work with the director of elementary to create a plan of action. And then Diane is going to be the liaison for us with that team to begin to look at that, because she has the historical knowledge and has been the liaison for Dr. Bruckner. And then they're going to have that plan, kind of a draft completed by August 4th for the board to review and for the cabinet to review. And then we're also going to take it out to the representatives for them to review. And just really see if there's a way we can shift from just thinking of when not to close it to how can we really begin to rebuild the elementary school there. I did ask for some data, which I was really pleased that Dave was able to pull that together for me. And currently in K-5, we have about 127 students in that boundary area. And this year, we're looking at right now, currently, I believe it's 60 students that are set to be enrolled there. So we know that some of the students there have enrolled outside of Crescent, which is about 30 students. And then some have enrolled inside Council Bluffs area, and some go to the non-public. So as we look at all of that, we'd really like to see if there's a way we can help the community not fear that every year are we closing Crescent, to that this is their school, this is their community, and that that we want to welcome their children and we want to give them a school in their community if they choose to attend there. I've been a part of a lot of school closings, and one of the things that has always been a factor that we've experienced is once you close a building in that community, a school is kind of the cornerstone, or schools are what kind of wrap around, and it's not always been a favorable place for the communities where we have closed schools. And they don't like a vacant building. They don't know what to do with the vacant building. How can we repurpose the vacant building? And I do hear the heart of the parents and the community members of Crescent. And I'm hoping that there's a way that we can rebuild that. I know in talking with Mr. Fringer today, he said at one point there was like 144 students that attended out in Crescent, and then it just started, declining. It doesn't help that Underwood's bus stop is a half mile from the school. And it doesn't help that if I was a parent and I had a kindergartner or a first grader, I don't know, the reason I've kind of taken the position that I would really like for the board not to vote on that they wouldn't close for a certain time, is I'm worried that if I was a parent, I would not say, I'll take my child to that school because I know it's going to be open for 2 years, but then I've got to go somewhere else. If I knew you were only promising me 2 years, I would probably start somewhere else, because we know what the research says about students and how they feel engaged, and parents get engaged and really feel connected to schools. And elementary schools are kind of cornerstones for children. They love it. Principals are involved, parents are involved. That's where you get your highest parent engagement. So that's kind of the conversation that we had, and I just wanted the board to know that we are going to work on an action plan. We're going to get out there with the principal. I'm going to join, cabinet members are going to join, and we're going to try to really work to rebuild that trust where they may believe they can come back and really take over the school again and really feel like that is a school. The other thing that Bill and I had a conversation about was, being creative in what that school looks like. The representatives talked about the launch program. You guys really put in a project Lead the Way, and, they really like that. We've also looked at maybe there's some other models that we could look at, a K-6 model instead of just a K-5, and see if parents feel that they would prefer for their children to stay there for 6 years before they move into a middle school. And sometimes it may be when you come from a smaller community to think about a middle school that's got over 1,000 children when there's just about 127 elementary children in that area. So there's a lot of learning I need to do before I can tell you what would work and how we can help. But I can tell you, we have a new principal that's very bright and very smart, and we have a principal that is excited about her opportunity. And when I spoke with Mark, our director of elementary, this afternoon, he was excited. He said, we're going to look upon this as an opportunity. And so that is where we have kind of been at. And so I'll just open it up now for discussion or questions that you might have.
Yeah, we were in the meeting, and we had some really good ideas about how to maybe kickstart some things going on through the summer and in the fall, like an open house or something that goes with their festival, their fall festival or something, kind of a meet and greet and some things. So that was kind of interesting because I found out some things about Crescent I didn't know before. So it was kind of fun to hear some of the ideas of what they're looking, what they have available in their community that they can put out there that would be of interest to other people,
And
families.
another point that I found that we don't allow Crescent isn't open in the evening. In other schools in our district, they use the schools in the evening. And so that school needs to be able to be a part of that community for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and any type of clubs and extracurricular activity they would like to use the school for.
Well, I understand the concern of the people of Crescent and worry that the school is closed. But when we voted to keep the school open, we voted to keep the school open indefinitely. I don't think
No. Our resolution was to close the school, and there was no discussion on a
How long
time
to leave
frame.
it
I
open.
mean, the
indefinite.
resolution was to close the school, and that resolution failed. So that means, as far as we, the board, are concerned, that school is an ongoing effort.
Yeah,
Open
and that's,
school,
that's,
and it will
So,
be,
I
and
mean,
we-
there was never
That's-
discussion during the the resolution had no time frame on how long we were going to keep it open. The
what I
resolution
mean.
was to close it, and it failed.
yeah.
And so that means, to me, as a board member who voted to close the school, to me, that says we as a board are going to support those students and families that are in that school.
That's,
Right.
that
Yeah.
was the point that I was trying to make. I guess where I was going with that was, I'm not sure where this idea that the school would only remain open for
Right.
2 years came from, because
Well,
that was never
That was
part of any
actually a request from the
discussion.
Crescent community. One of them requested that we give them 2 years to turn around enrollment.
But that was an open discussion. That was never.
Yeah.
It was never
it was
officially
never an
stated that,
official thing
There was a
that-
lot of open discussion of,
There was discussion about beef stew, but that was never, it never made the agenda about when or how or what if. None of that was ever made as a motion. It was a motion to close, it failed. So I don't know where this mixed
there is-
messages is coming from about closing in 2018-19, maybe closing in 2 years. We shouldn't even be discussing that or talking about it, because that's not what
Right.
Well,
the
I do
motion was.
understand their fear and their worry of the school closing for all of those reasons that you just mentioned, that, an elementary school is so important. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that we are, I guess I am in, you know, support of Crescent and and so you know, want to state publicly the Crescent community, we don't have any plans, and the school is open. It's open indefinitely. So, you know, I think that these are good ideas for getting the building to be more accessible to more people in the community and share what the building does, and I think those are all really good things. One of the things that I thought a lot about, you know, during that time was, you know, a lot of people live in Crescent because they want to be a part of a small community. And when they think about enrolling their kid in a school, Crescent Elementary obviously is a small building, which fits what they need. But after Crescent, you know, they're going to Kern and they're going to AL. And so, you know, a young family that wants that small school feeling Underwood may be very attractive to them for those reasons and enroll there early as kindergartners. One thing that may be beneficial is to get more of the Kern and AL community engaged in Crescent, and get, you know, the Crescent community a little bit more engaged here in Council Bluffs at Kern and AL, so that they can see all of the opportunities that are available to them, and maybe build some relationships between Kern and AL families and Crescent families.
And that was one thing we discussed on that day. I asked about the transition years and what type of plans or programs have you had in place to help. And transition years to me would be entering 6th grade and then entering 9th grade. And how did the counselors reach out? What type of open houses did they have, or nights that they could visit the school and come as a community? And that is something that that's going to be part of the action plan. It's going to be a piece that we're going to put into place so that the parents know. But Dr. Borkman and I spoke about that, because he said with them being a small community, it is just more attractive for them to move to a small community. But, you know, and then I was talking about, well, you know, K6, K8, both of those are models that a lot of districts use. But I'm also have to be aware of the size of the building. Could it hold up to 8th grade? Because that might make some look, you know, be more attractive to some parents knowing that they stay together. It's something that we have to really dig in and look, and then we need their input, their stakeholders, because we want to meet the stakeholders with what their needs are and what would be attractive to them, not that we're just trying to put something out there to see if they will come. I want to make sure it's something that they want and not something we force and then say it didn't work, see it didn't work. So the only way it will work is if all stakeholders work together. And so we're going to give that a good shot and really begin to see if we can open up the school, get them involved, let them be in. Because when I've been out there, and I did drive out there, I drove around, I wanted to feel the community myself. And I didn't expect to see the houses and the community neighborhoods. I expected to see more farmland. And when I saw the neighborhood and began to just really get a sense, it is important that they have a school. But it's important that we help them develop a good school. And so it will take us a while, but I believe it can be achieved.
I think it's important that we support the staff of the school too.
Yes, very much so.
Any other comments or discussion?
Sounds to me like a great way forward. Thank you for your leadership in that, Vicki.
Thank you for attending the meeting. All right.
Yeah, glad you could be there.
It was fun.
No other discussion. We'll move on to our resolutions. Approval of legislative priorities for 2018. Is there a motion?
I would move that we suggest 6 priorities, 3 of them financial, the SSA, the extended learning, and the,
Equity?
equity for transportation and per pupil.
Okay.
And then the push the SAVE fund and the compulsory attendance. And then express our displeasure at do not do the ESA. Diane can clean up the language, but I hope that gives you an essence of where we're at. I think that's the 6 we talked about, isn't it?
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion?
I still believe focusing on too many of the financial aspects wouldn't necessarily be a wise decision, and it would be better to focus in on just a few financials, limiting it to no more than two. And so I can't support a list that includes more than two.
Any
I
other
th-
discussion?
I see where you're coming from, Scott. These are going to get narrowed down at the conference, and so really, these 6 would be more of our, just as a board, internal. So I'm in support of the 6, but I understand your point.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Wilson?
Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Ms. Riley?
No.
Mr. Hanson?
No.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes. And with that, motion carries. Next, we have policy review approval, amend travel expense reimbursement regulation 4221, and second reading of policy 213 and corresponding administrative regulation 213.1. Appointment of legal counsel to represent the board and superintendent. Approve the award of bid number 18-001 for fitness equipment, and approve the award of bid number 17-017 Rue Elementary East Side Playground.
You'll have to take those
Move
individually.
those one at a time.
One at a time.
Yep.
Policy review approval. Do we have a motion?
Which one? Sorry.
Amend travel expense reimbursement.
I move to approve the change to Administrative Regulation 422.1 travel expense reimbursement as presented.
And do we include the second reading of the policy?
Yes.
It's all in the same
I
motion.
second
Yeah,
that
it's all in the
motion,
same one.
presuming it includes the second reading of policy 213 and corresponding administration regulation 213.1, as I believe was intended.
That's the way it's set out here.
Okay. Any discussion? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Hanson? Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes. With that, policy review approval passes. Next, we have appointment of legal counsel to represent the board and superintendent. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the policy 213, legal counsel and administrative regulation 213.1,
that.
legal services regulation as presented.
That was included.
Mm-mm.
No,
Different.
it's legal
That's
counsel
second
to
reading.
represent the board of
Second
superintendent.
reading.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one question regarding what was presented. So in the packet it says, these people have been named as contacts in the firm, but these are subject to change. Is that simply in there to ensure that if the firm decide, and it's the firm's decision that the contact will now be this other person, it's not necessarily the district's decision?
And it also was, as we talked about it internally, if they would leave the firm and take a job somewhere else, then if they employed new legal counsel, that we would then use them. And so that kind of left us that kind of window so that if they did take a new job and then we got new legal, we wouldn't have to come back.
I also understood when I read over that this is a 3-year deal rather than a 1-year.
Yes.
Yes.
We're comfortable with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Mr. Wilson?
Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Hanson?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes. And with that, motion carries. Next, we have approval, the award of bid 18-001 fitness equipment. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the award of bid number 18-001 for the Phase 2 of fitness equipment replacement project to Body Basic Fitness Equipment for $42,231.88. Push, pedal, and pull for $1,424.55. And Nova Fitness Equipment for $9,216 as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing None. Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Hanson? Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
No, we just did that.
Yep. Dave did that one.
I thought we did this
Part of it.
second reading of the policy.
That was in this, that Scott did the amendment.
Okay.
Okay, next we have approval of bid 17-017 Rue Elementary East Side Playground. Do we have a motion?
I
Move.
approval of bid number 17-017 Rue Elementary East Side Playground to Dostal's Construction Company in the amount of $76,124 as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Hanson?
Yes.
Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes, and motion carries. With that, we have approval of our consent agenda. Business items, including approval of renewal contract with Vocational Development Center VODEC for the 2017-2018 school year, approval of a senior year plus memorandum of understanding with Iowa Western Community College for the 2017-2018 school year, approval of memorandum of understanding between Children's Square USA and Council Bluffs Community School District for the 2017-2018 school year, and approval to participate in the Metro Intervention Center provided by Boys Town for the 2017-2018 school year. Approval to remove Dr. Bruckner and add Dr. Murillo as signatory for all district accounts. Approval of memorandum of understanding with Potawatomi Juvenile Court Services, personal actions, claims, and accounts. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve our consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Ms. Riley?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
I'm going to abstain because the MOUs for the iWestern Senior Plus are generated out of my office at the college.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Hanson?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes. And with that, meeting adjourned.